So, my name is Elizabeth, and today we're going to talk about foreigners in Guam. Clearly, if you've ever heard about Guam, this is going to be what comes to mind, the brown tree snake. But actually, we're going to talk about a few more. First, starting all the way back with people. Jumping back over 4,000 years ago, there were no known human inhabitants of Guam. The only mammals on the island were two species of bats. Of course, when Austronesian voyagers found their way to the Mariana Islands, the landscape and ecosystem changed. New species of plants and animals found their way to the islands, but it remained relatively isolated from the rest of the world until Spanish contact in the 1500s.
Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition!
Brought with the Spanish were cats, dogs, the carabao, deer, pigs, chickens, goats, and disease. After the Spanish came, waves of people from other lands like the US and Japan fought to claim this island. However, throughout the history of people, the wildlife became an ingrained part of the local culture. This brings us to our first foreigner. This is the Mangrove Monitor lizard, or what locals call a litai. They're thought to come shortly after colonization of people, so they've been here for so long, they're basically considered native. Their bodies are dark with bright yellow spots, said to be painted on by the native railbird. In a quid pro sans the quo situation, it ran away and was cursed with a forked tongue. This one in particular is just a baby, but they can get up to 4 feet long. Sucker! With a mouth full of serrated teeth and gut hooks for claws, these monitors are fierce predators. They were once considered pests as they would attack people's chickens, bringing us to our next foreigner. The cane toad. Originating in South America, they have found their way across seas as mostly means of biocontrol. That is, being purposefully introduced to eat pests, mostly for agricultural crops, like sugarcane or banana. What makes them so easy to introduce to new places is their ability to eat almost anything that fits in their mouth. Insects, snails, crabs, mice, birds, and yes, on some occasions, they've been known to eat human poop. Now, I can't really find for what pests they were brought here, but it is rumored that they were brought for monitors. How the heck would that work? Well, if you didn't already know, they are toxic. This gland right here, behind the eardrum and the eye, is the part that secretes the toxin, or they actually have the ability to shoot it.
And the grand prize winner! The
cane
toad.
Not only are the adults toxic, but also the tadpoles. You can ID these tadpoles because they're jet black and triangular shaped, and they also tend to be tinier than other native species. This means that if the monitors tried to snack on a little toad like this, they would probably die or get really sick. Just like many other parts of the world, like Australia, they're invasive here as well. But interestingly, they also eat all the other non-native species that were brought here. Cane toads aren't the only species that were introduced to Guam for biocontrol. Lurking in the shallows of Guam is another introduced species, the mosquito fish. This kind of fish has one of the widest introductions in the world for biocontrol. Mostly native to the US and Mexico, it's been transported to multiple countries for you guessed it, controlling mosquito populations. Looking up close at their body, you can see that their mouths are actually on the top, which makes eating from the surface ideal, and that's why they're prolific mosquito larvae eaters. However, studies have shown that they prefer worms and other larvae to mosquito larvae, so they're really not all that better than native fish. These are small fish, similar in appearance to guppies, that actually give live birth. The mother rhino is giving birth. Cool! It's said that they give birth between 1 and 315 young in one breeding cycle, and they do that 3 to 5 times a year depending on where they're living and the ideal conditions. So, as these things typically go, biocontrollers that were brought in somewhere foreign tend to be invasive, and that includes the mosquito fish for most areas. A not so purposeful introduction was the brown tree snake. It's actually native to coastal Australia, Papua New Guinea, and eastern Indonesia. They're only a short plane ride or boat ride away from places like Guam. And that's actually what happened. In the 1950s, the military was transporting a lot of cargo from Papua New Guinea, and at least one pregnant female or multiple individuals were able to hop on ships and made their way to Guam. They've been quite comfortable ever since they've landed here, to the point where their population is estimated to be about 2 million on island.
Snakes. Why did it have to be snakes?
As you may already know, these snakes are venomous. What makes them different is that their fangs are actually in the back of their mouth. So most people think of vipers with the fangs being in the front, but these are rear-fanged snakes, which makes them a lot less dangerous to people, primarily because they have to get a really good bite on you and chew with their back teeth in order to envenomate. Even then, it's really not that potent for people. If bitten by a tree snake, most bites will just get a little inflamed and you might have a rash, but it's nothing to go to the hospital for unless you're worried about infection, which might be the real problem. The brown tree snake is an arboreal species, primarily sleeping during the day in the trees and coming down or venturing through the trees to hunt at night. So, being an arboreal species, what do they eat? Honestly, that depends on their size and what's available.
You know, I'm a dreamer, but my heart's a goal. I had to run away hiding, so I didn't come home, look. Just when things went right, it doesn't mean they were always wrong.
So as far as Guam goes, this is the only snake species on the island that you have to worry about.
Actually, excuse me, Elizabeth. Actually, the blind snake is also a snake on Guam.
Oh, I forgot about that.
I wanted to be in the video.
Chris was right. There is actually one more snake in Guam, which brings me to this potted plant. So if you just dig around in the soil, you will find the blind snake, or the flower pot snake. They can only get up to about 6 inches, making it the smallest known snake in the world. No, it is not a piece of string. It is not a worm. It is actually a snake. These snakes are native to Africa and Asia, but because of the plant trade, have found their way all the way across the world. Unlike the brown tree snake, these snakes are burrowers, so they'll be found underground almost all of their lives. This brings us to the question, what do they eat? Their mouths are tiny, so their food has to be even tinier. They eat the eggs, larvae, and pupa of ants and termites. No, not the full-grown adults, because those are too big. Their eyes are really interesting because they're covered with translucent scales, making them basically blind. And, fun fact, all of them are female. So this rather large lady right here actually reproduces asexually, meaning they don't need to have any eggs fertilized in order to make babies.
Who am I between my legs? My sack's filled with sperm, but is my heart filled with eggs?
What does that mean for the babies? They're all clones and genetically identical. Now, if you're actually looking for one of these snakes, you might get it confused with the other small black creature that lurks on the ground here, and that is a flatworm.
Okay, so these super disgusting, slimy
flatworms are called the New Guinea flatworms. They were introduced onto Guam to help biocontrol another slimy, disgusting creature of the forest, the African giant snail. So the way this vile forest act takes place is these worms that have one eye in the top of their pointy weird head and a mouth that is located in the middle of their body. They find the snail, they slimily wrap up around the snail like a gross anaconda, and then they prolapse their throat out of the middle of their torso into the African snail and pump in their digestive juices and eat these things from the inside out. And then this just goes on and on day after day in the jungles of Guam. It's the most disgusting thing that happens in the jungle anywhere on the planet.
Animals featured in this video are just few of the many that you can find on Guam, both during the day and at night. If you have any questions about some of the wildlife, go ahead and drop a comment below. But otherwise, this was totally awesome. Chris is gonna hate that fun so much. Ah! Also, subscribe and check out some of our other videos. Party like a king, party like a king, totally dude. You know what's weird is when you flip them upside down, their eyes